Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
It is Friday, so that must mean this is a special edition of It's Just Politics.
It must be.
So we have spent the past 2 days in Lansing in just back-to-back, wall-to-wall conversations with lawmakers.
Some newly elected.
Some leaving office soon. And the one thing for sure that everyone seems to be able to agree on is everyone is trying to make sense of this new political environment.
In both Lansing and Washington, D.C.
Right. So we figured we'd bring you some of those conversations today.
I spoke with outgoing Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee about what happened to Democrats across the board on Tuesday and who he sees as the possible future of the Democratic Party.
He named names.
Even though he said he wasn't going to.
I know, I laughed when I heard that. Must be that Pluta charm. Anyway, we're going to bring you that conversation. But first, I just sat down just a few hours ago with Republican Congressman-elect Tom Barrett. Congressman-elect, this was considered a real, true toss-up, not just in Michigan, we should say, right, but across the country. What do you make of this win?
Well, certainly I'm excited. Never take anything for granted, but certainly excited for the opportunity and ready to get to work for the people here in my district. A friend of mine shared with me afterward that this was the first time a Republican had flipped a seat in Michigan in Congress since 2010. So I didn't realize that at the time, but that's an exciting thing to be able to do. And again, nothing I take for granted, but one that we see as an opportunity to really deliver for this district and for the country now.
14 years, a decade and a half. 2 years ago, I think you and I were actually sitting in these exact seats. We were talking the last time you were running.
I think so.
You ended up losing that race by some 20,000 votes. You won this year by some 16,000. What does that tell you about the voters here in the 7th Congressional District?
Well, it shows you have to go out and earn their vote. 2 years ago, my campaign was kind of on a compressed timeline because the redistricting process was delayed by so long that I was really only in the race about 11 months before the election. Of course, was challenging an incumbent. She had spent considerably more than I did in that campaign, and there were a number of other factors at play. And this time, while I was outspent on this race again, it wasn't by the orders of magnitude of difference. There was no incumbency advantage, and I had a longer runway to kind of get out and really talk to and meet with the voters in my district and learn from them about the issues they cared the most about and what they wanted to see out of their member of Congress. And I really tried to stick to those issues. So when I would talk to voters and listen to them, the concerns they brought up were really focused on the cost of living, with the security at our southern border, with issues related to crime, and then with the national security threats we're facing. Those were the issues I put on my website, I put on my campaign messaging, and really stuck to those issues. As much as they tried to pull me away from that, that's what we continue to go back to, and I think the results speak for themselves.
So, I mean, it's very clear. I mean, we saw just historic voter turnout here in Michigan. Donald Trump won the state. Donald Trump won the popular vote in the country.
Yeah.
What do you...
He's a popular guy.
Should this be called a red wave? Or was this voters voting frustration? What do you make of what we saw?
Yeah. I don't know if we're in the political sense of wave elections to the degree that they were maybe, a generation ago or even 10 or 15 years ago. Certainly, President Trump had a big night Tuesday night, carried the popular vote, the first time a Republican's done that since George W. Bush in 2004, I believe. Republicans retook the state house here in Michigan by actually a fair number of votes now, a bigger majority than the Democrats have right now. The Republicans will be replacing them with a larger majority than that. Certainly my race was a bellwether nationally as well as here in Michigan. And Republicans are poised to hold the majority in Congress and probably expand that. I mean, it's still to be determined by a few districts that are still being counted. And then Republicans took the U.S. Senate. So I think that there are real issues of opportunity there. I think it speaks to the frustrations that voters had about the last 4 years and what effect that had on their lives, whether it's their livelihood directly through the cost of living, whether it's the scourge of fentanyl, the open border, The fact that so many people had crossed illegally into the country, that we were giving away so many benefits at the expense of our own citizens. I think that stacked up in a way that frustrated people, and they were expressing that in the vote that they cast a few days ago.
We're speaking with Congressman-elect Tom Barrett, who just won the state's 7th congressional district. You mentioned the state legislature. You mentioned the state house. You were formerly a state senator. Much smaller caucus in state legislatures, right? You're about to go to Washington, D.C., where you are going to be part of a much larger Republican caucus. What do you think that's going to mean for the kind of work that you'd like to do as a lawmaker?
Well, it means you have to build relationships with people that come from places far away from where you live, far away from the state that you represent. When we were in the state legislature together, we all came from the same state. We all had a similar, mindset and an appreciation for the state of Michigan and the, beauty and benefit that has. Now you've got to go to Washington and compete against other members from other geographic areas, other communities across the country. Whether they're Republican or Democrat, they're going to be pulling in different directions, and it's going to take an assertive but respectful and cooperative role to do that. We've got to have our delegation united in many ways. I actually just got off the phone with Senator-elect Alyssa Slotkin, so we were exchanging congratulations and willingness to work together as we transition this congressional office, but also building a strong delegation so that we have issues of importance for people of Michigan to go forward working on in even a nonpartisan way. But those relationships get built gradually. I'm heading out to Washington for my orientation here soon, and I'm excited to get started on building those relationships. I had a number of conversations with members of Congress before even being elected, was also part of a cohort of veterans running that, several of us won our elections and kind of already know each other a little bit and can work together on some things. So I'm excited to go do it. It's a great opportunity, and it's really the beauty of America and our political system is everybody there represents a unique and different district, and we can all learn from one another about what that looks like. And if we have the best interests of our country in mind, I think that it can be a great thing.
Well, speaking of compromise and conversations across the aisle, Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin, now Senator-elect Alyssa Slotkin, for whom this seat you are taking over, she's a member of the U.S. House of Representatives Problem Solvers Caucus. What do you think about the Problem Solvers Caucus? Is that something that, again, you may be interested in being a part of?
Yeah, I'm not going to turn down anything before I learn more about it. I've never been elected to Congress before, so I've been at it for 72 hours or something. But I am familiar with the Problem Solvers Caucus. I will say I want to go to Washington and not promise my vote to any caucus or any specific group. I want to represent my district, whatever that looks like. I don't need, some caucus name to validate that in any way. I want to work with people to get the job done. I want to work with my colleagues in the Republican conference where that's appropriate. I want to work with my Democratic colleagues where it's appropriate to do that. I had an independent record in the state legislature. I am a conservative and I don't shy away from that, but I had truly an independent record. If you look at my votes in the state legislature, over 300 times I voted against my own leadership as a member of the Republican caucus in Lansing. I had 38 different bills that I sponsored that passed with substantial bipartisan support that were signed into law, some by a Republican governor, some by a Democratic governor. So these are things that I'm willing to continue working toward and continue working on as I look to represent the best interests of our nation and of my constituents in Washington, D.C.
Finally, I'm curious, we talked at the very top about this being a swing district within really a swing state. Still, there's some folks who you're going to be representing in Congress who are just bereft from Tuesday. How are you thinking about them? Any message for folks who are just really unhappy with the fact that you're now Congressman-elect?
Well, I hope to earn their trust and at the very least earn their respect. For some people, it's probably unlikely that we would agree on issues necessarily, but I hope people give me the opportunity to, at the very least, earn their respect, to listen to them, and where we don't agree, to do it respectfully, and where I can work for them, to do that with the tenacity that I hope to bring to this job to really do the right thing. Even if people don't agree with me, I hope to, at the very least, earn the respect that they have and never take that for granted, because I think people look to political figures with an expectation they're going to fail, and that becomes a confirmation bias, and I'm hoping to cut against that and really do my part to uphold some of what they would expect out of a member of Congress, even one they may not have voted for.
Congressman-elect Tom Barrett of Michigan's 7th Congressional District. Thanks for the time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Rick, back in the studio here. I thought it was really interesting that Barrett noted that he and now Senator-elect Elissa Slotkin had already spoken. You know, usually you hear of folks who've run against each other making the call after the election is called, you know, the congratulations kind of thing. But these two weren't running against each other this time.
Well, no, they did that 2 years ago.
Right. And now he's taking over her district as she moves on to the Senate and having that conversation about possibly even, I don't know, working together. Anyway, it's going to be really interesting to see how Barrett, who's very conservative,
Yes.
Represents this toss-up 7th Congressional District over the next 2 years. We're obviously going to be talking more to him in this next session.
And meantime, over in the 8th Congressional District, I spoke with outgoing Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee.
Yes, we should note we were at an event and you asked him to step outside for that interview.
I did, thus some of the street noise.
Yeah, just a normal afternoon, standing on the curb, talking to Dan Kildee.
I started out by just asking him what he makes of Tuesday's election results.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's something we weren't expecting. Trump had an appeal, and it was largely on these economic issues. And I think if there's a lesson for Democrats, it's going back to James Carville. It's the economy, stupid. And, I don't think our message was as clear or as consistent on those issues. Now, having said that, it was a mixed set of results in many ways. Obviously, looking at it from my perspective, Democrats may gain seats in the United States Congress in a year that was essentially a red wave. So I think the really important thing for all of us to do is not to overread these outcomes, not to overread the results, not to miss things that we could improve upon. But like for the House Democratic Caucus, which I'm very much a part of, the district that I currently represent, clearly went against what was a statewide and a national trend on the top of the ticket. So, we got to fix what we can, but not fix what's not broken.
What can we learn from, I guess some people would consider them the anomalies like Kristen McDonald-Rivet, those places where Democrats won, and what seemed to be an otherwise pretty sweeping Republican year.
Sweeping Republican year at the top of the ticket, for sure. And it took down, at least in the United States Senate, a couple of folks who were there just honestly by the grace of God. I mean, the fact that Tester was representing Montana or Sherrod Brown in Ohio, those are tough places to hold. But I think what you take from a Kristen McDonald-Rivet is, stick to your message. And she did. She was very focused on the economy. We were obviously trying to echo those messages as best we can, but be disciplined in your campaign and keep your head down, focus on your own race. I don't know in broad form if there's a whole lot we could have done to change the narrative come July forward. That's one piece. The other piece, and I know how this will sound a little cynical, but we tend toward truth in our arguments, and they're not bound by those restrictions. And that made it more difficult, I think.
Did, in 22, with the abortion question on the ballot, did Democrats overperform and maybe build some expectations going into this election?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big win in our sails in 22, that issue. And I think one of the, I guess you'd call it a mistake or a miscalculation, is to somehow believe that momentum on that issue would carry forward into a race that was almost entirely going to be dictated by the economic issues. And so there was, you can look at some of the campaigns who tended to lean in on that. And even some of the advocacy groups tended to lean in on the issue for which they advocate rather than lean in on issues that work in the districts where their outcomes are on the ballot. The best example of this going back a long time is the National Rifle Association. When they got involved in campaigns back when they were more effective, they're certainly not now, but when they were more effective, they were effective because they didn't lead on issues of gun rights. They led on economic issues against candidates who opposed them on the core issue that motivated them. And I'm not sure all of the advocacy groups on the Democratic leaning side have ever gotten that memo, to lead on issues that really move voters, even if it means it's not the central issue to your particular agenda.
What do you think it means for Democrats, but I guess also the field in general, that going into the next round of midterms, there's going to be no incumbents on the statewide ballot other than Gary Peters, presuming he runs again. That in the state offices, you're not going to have in the top three incumbents. You are going to have a Republican in the White House and one who courts controversy.
Right.
What does it mean? I mean, it's obviously a long time out to forecast. What do you think it means for races 2 years from now?
Well, number one, it makes a huge difference who you nominate for these statewide offices. We proved that in the last couple of election cycles. The issues, like the reproductive rights issues, were one aspect of that. But the big difference in 2022 statewide races had more to do with quality of the candidates than anything else. And I think that's one thing that we need to keep in mind and lean in on, number one. Secondly, that the one issue that never leaves the stage is the economy. Lots of issues come and go. The economy is always there because people think about this when they're sitting at their kitchen tables. And when we craft a message, when we advocate policy, it has to be focused on those issues.
So, I mean, people say, the economy, but the economy isn't in and of itself a singular issue.
Right.
That it's a whole bundle of issues: housing costs, inflation, groceries, whatever.
This year it was inflation more than anything else. When you talk about the economy, how do people feel the economy? Inflation. And I think that was the issue that it was very difficult for us to get ahead of, because it's very tough to go into a political setting and bring out the econometric data that shows that the U.S., as opposed to other industrialized countries, are doing better on the issues of inflation post-pandemic than everybody else. Everyone's asleep before you get to the first comma. So it's really tough to have that argument, even though it might be true. So the way you have to reverse engineer it. You have to start at the kitchen table and hear what people are saying there and address them in their own language. And I'm not sure Democrats have done that quite as well as we should. The one thing we know about Donald Trump is that he speaks that language.
Is there any Democrat on the horizon who also does?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are. We have a bench that hasn't really been given a lot of encouragement lately. But I'm looking forward to seeing those people emerge. I don't want to name any names right now. I mean, I'm not going to say Pete Buttigieg just because that's what I'm thinking.
Pete Buttigieg, he named names. Funny enough, Rick, we just had a conversation with Buttigieg last week here on the pod.
Why, yes, we did.
If you missed that, you can always take a listen. Just download the It's Just Politics podcast wherever you get your podcasts from.
And hey, we've got the newsletter too.
We do. You can sign up for the newsletter at michiganpublic.org. And that is It's Just Politics for this Friday. I am Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Let's talk again next week.